Welcome to PyPod Chronicles, a series that brings our tech blog to life in a whole new way. Covering an array of topics surrounding Python and tech, from programming tips, best practices, and so much more. Let's get immersed in Python with the Nerd Nook on the go. If you've been keeping up with the blog, then you'll know me as Rusty Raccoon. But if you're new here, I'm Josh, your host. Here we are in episode 4, and I gave this one the title of A Guide to Object-Oriented Programming. I'm stoked to have you all here. And what are we going to be talking about in this episode? Well, you guessed it, OOP, or Object-Oriented Programming. Now, what is this? Well, real quickly, object-oriented programming is what high-level programming languages can do. And other languages like Python, which are OOP-based, are Java or C++. But let's break down what that means for Python. Now, don't freak out, guys, because in this episode, you're going to learn more about the crazy world of OOP and Python. Let's talk about what OOP actually means. And essentially, it's a way of programming where you create objects that have certain properties and behaviors. These objects, once you create them, we can use them to interact with each other, and we can reuse them throughout our code. So think of it like building blocks, but with code. And just like building blocks, OOP can be both incredibly frustrating but incredibly satisfying. The first thing you need to understand about OOP in Python is classes. Classes are like blueprints for objects, or like a wrapper. They define what an object will look like and how it will behave. Think of a class as a recipe for a cake. A recipe tells you exactly what ingredients you need and how to mix them together to make yourself a good cake. In the same way, a class tells you what properties an object will have and what methods, aka functions, it can use. Now that we know that, we need to create a class, or more specifically, define a class. When you define a function, we use the keyword def. Well, for a class, we use the keyword class, followed by the name of the class. You can name it anything you want, but this is the only time in Python that you should make sure it's capitalized, followed by a semicolon. Now, inside a class, we can store all of our code, and we can do the same thing that we do inside the class, outside the class. Here is where we put all of our methods. A method is literally just a function in a class. Usually, the first method in a class is init. Init means initialize or start, and this method automatically gets called as soon as a new object is created. And this is a special method, or a dunder method in Python, because it has double underscores before and after the word init. Inside here, any variables you will use in your class are called properties. We need to define the properties inside init. If I have 3 properties, for example for a car, make, model, year, I'm going to give my init method 3 parameters, make, model, year. Those are the values to our properties. Once you define your init, you're free now to make any methods that your class might use. So what actions will the attributes have? So, for example, if we made a method called drive, every time I call this method, this function, it's just going to print vroom vroom. In order to use our class or any of the methods, it's now time to create an object, and this is done outside of the class. Now, literally, an object is a variable that has a class as the value. So, if you have an object called sports car equals car class. And in my car class, we made 3 properties, self.make, self.model, self.year. When I create my object, sports car equals car, I need to give car 3 arguments. as these will be the values used to your properties. Imagine I give the arguments Lamborghini Aventador 2022. Now I can take my sports car object, which is a Lamborghini, and I can link that to my drive method, my drive function. For a method to work, it must be linked to an object. So sportscar.drive. In your terminal, it's going to print off vroom vroom. Once you start getting the hang of classes and objects, you guys are going to be amazed at how much easier it is to write these complex programs. You can create objects for everything from bank accounts to video games and chatbots. And you can reuse those objects throughout your code. It's like having a toolkit full of pre-made parts that you can use to build anything you want. Now that you've heard me ramble on a bit about what an object is and how we create a class, let's talk about one more key fundamental. That is class inheritance. Python has something called inheritance, which is the ultimate way to reuse your code. Inheritance allows you to create a new class that's based on an existing class, allowing you to inherit all of its attributes, properties, and methods or functions. This is kind of like cloning an object, but with the ability to make changes and add new properties or new methods to a new object without affecting the original class. In the previous example, I created a class called car. Now, let me make another class called electric car. Inside parentheses, I'm going to put my first class, car. So electric car is inheriting the car class. Now, when I use my init constructor method, that special start function, the first thing I want to do is I want to call and activate my superclass. I want to call and activate the class that I'm inheriting. To do this, Python has the super function. I'm going to call the super function and say super.init. And this will inherit the make, model, and year attributes from the car class. Let's say then I define one additional property that only the electric car class will have, self.battery size, because an electric car has a battery size. I'll then create one unique method. So I could create a method called charge, because electric cars need to charge. All that this method does is it's going to print charging, then the make of the car. I'm going to create a new object. Previously, I have an object called sports car. Now I'm going to make an object called Tesla. And I can say Tesla equals electric car class. Remember, electric car, I need to give it my arguments. So Tesla, Model S, 2023, make, model, year. Those are coming from the car class. Then I'm going to give it 100 for the battery size, because that is a new property we defined in the electric car class. Don't worry, you still have access to the original drive method you made in the car class, because the electric car is inheriting car. But now you also have access to your method, charge. Pretty sweet, huh? Now you can create your own classes and inherit from existing ones. And the possibilities are endless. Just remember to have fun, and don't stress over it. After all, programming is supposed to be fun, right? And if all else fails, just remember, there's always the classic print hello world. That's all for now. Thanks guys for tuning into this episode of PyPod Chronicles. And be sure to check out the blog if you're looking for more. Link in the description. Well, until next time, I'll see you guys in the next episode.